Hey humans! So, bosses can be really annoying in Duet and Abyss, especially with their frequent immunity phase. But if you know the right strategies, you will not just be able to avoid them, but exploit them to defeat them even faster than you would be able to otherwise. I'll be giving you all of the best ways that I have found, either by using the boss's AI against it, or by using certain pieces of gear. The best thing that you're going to be able to use in order to defeat the bosses and skip their immunity phases is by breaking their stance, and employing a weapon such as the Destructo, or Entropic Singularity, Silent Sower, or the Stellar Finality. All of these will be really good at destroying the boss's shield, and they will all have their own different quirks about them, but for the most part you are going to be running the exact same or a very similar set of wedges on them. This is what I'm currently running on my Destructo. Now, for my own testing, all of these are going to be very similar in performance, but there are going to be slight differences. The best out of the free options that I've found has been the Silent Sower, but it's not insanely stronger compared to the Destructo or Entropic Singularity. But Destructo and Entropic Singularity are both going to have certain synergies when utilized with different supports. When it comes to Destructo, obviously it's going to be providing skill range, which can be a very important stat for your supports, especially when it comes to buff uptime and application. Entropic Singularity can have certain interactions with other supports, as well as it being the easiest to get working at its full performance, especially with that really high trigger probability, and its perk also giving you more trigger probability as well. Now, I don't have it currently, but Stellar Finality would likely be another extremely good option, much like Destructo, because not only would it be doing damage like Destructo does, but it would also be providing another hit of damage with the cluster bombs. So this one could potentially be the best one, but I haven't quite tested it yet. Now, of course, all of this is really good, especially when you're taking your team into the immersive theater, but there are obviously going to be reasons why you wouldn't want to run a weapon like this. In my opinion, it will almost always be best to run something like this because most characters aren't going to have struggles with the mobbing phases, and these are a significant boost against boss performance compared to something like the Arclight Apocalypses or even Fina's weapon, the Dreamweaver's Feather, especially when you pair it with a demon wedge like Surge on one of your supports. But there are still ways to use the enemy AI against it in order to be able to defeat them without triggering a damage phase, or by triggering fewer immunity phases. Some of these are going to employ boss stance breaking strategies in order to cut them down, especially when we get into theater strats. But a lot of these can actually be completely one-cycled, so long as you have enough damage, if you pick the right time to attack. So obviously we're going to be going through the bosses in order. Now, Sibylle, you're not going to have any issue with her whatsoever because she does not have an immunity phase at all. Now, she does still have a boss phase change, and it's right at the beginning. She's just going to have this little bar right here and a bar in the middle as well, where she's going to go into another phase, and in that next phase change, she will be completely immune to stance reduction, so you'd be able to see that right here. The bar is not moving at all. But because she's also not immune, that really doesn't matter, and you can just keep damaging her and attacking her. So Sibylle's obviously going to be the easiest boss out of the bunch, and that's why you usually see her used a lot in damage showcases, because she's a big fat boss with a big fat health bar, and she doesn't move around a lot. Now, if you are employing a stance breaking strategy, you can wait for your supports to break the boss's stance before pushing past that threshold, but if you're doing enough damage anyways, that's largely not going to be necessary, and waiting for a boss stance break may actually cause you to lose more time than if you didn't, depending on how much damage you're doing to the boss and how much health they have. So moving on to the next boss, Crystalophile is going to be on the easier end as well, because he's going to be a boss with a guaranteed down phase. And I just want to say that I'm not using any stance breaking weapons on my supports either. I'm using a skill duration and Fina's signature weapon for the extra damage, because you would want to be using something like that in this scenario without a boss stance breaking weapon. But as you can see right here, the Crystalophile is going to go down the second I break every single one of his limbs, and he actually goes down for a little bit. If you don't deal enough damage to break his limbs, you can just defeat him in this stance break. It really doesn't matter for this guy whatsoever if you do have the damage. If you're in a theater scenario, and I actually demonstrated this with a previous video of mine covering the Immersive Theater, and this is going to be with the Knifel run that I was in, and as you can see, right after we get done with the first immunity phase, he's actually going to have his main immunity phase delayed, and this is based on the amount of damage you're going to do to his health bar. So if you just wait and let your supports break that barrier for you, then you'll be able to get another down phase and completely skip that immunity phase. And if your supports have really good boss stance breaking weapons, then that'll actually be a decent time save from the normal immunity phase, especially considering you're going into a massive damage multiplier right after. Of course, if you don't have enough damage to destroy him here anyway, it's not really going to matter that much. Now, next up, we're going to have the Eclosioner, and this is where your player input is going to start mattering a bit more depending on what the boss does. So, right here, we have the first phase that we're gonna go through, and this is very important because this bar right here is the damage threshold you're going to have to go through in order to get the Eclosioner to do the Chrysalis of Broken Dreams. However, if you get her past half health, and she hasn't done Chrysalis of Broken Dreams yet, she will go straight into the immunity phase instead. So this is where employing a little bit of patience can be a major help. So right here, she's going to go to the middle of the arena, and then this is where we would break her, and then go through that whole damage phase right here. However, if we go into a situation where we wind up taking out the majority of her health bar before, and as you can see, it could be pretty easy to do. If you don't defeat her quickly enough, she will go straight into the immunity phase, and that will often lead to a much more substantial time loss compared to getting her to just above that halfway point and then going into the Chrysalis of Broken Dreams and breaking her right there. There is actually a little piece of tech that you could do regarding the Immersive Theater. Now, she isn't in the current Immersive Theater, so this is something you would have to employ, but in future Immersive Theaters where she could show up again, and this is something that I actually utilized in one of my previous theater showcases as well on my channel. If you actually get her to like slightly above halfway, and then let her do the Chrysalis of Broken Dreams, and then don't break her and let the normal first immunity phase go through, then as soon as all the enemies are gone and you get back to damaging the boss, you can break her and completely skip that immunity phase if you defeat her within that down phase. So that is another way that you can skip an immunity phase without relying on boss stance breaking weapons from your supports. Now next up is going to be the Warden of the Inferno, or Hellfire, because I mean, it's the same deal. This is going to be the first boss that is going to have an immunity phase that does not also have a down phase that's guaranteed. And it's a pretty early immunity phase as well, which leads to many people thinking that it's unavoidable. So what most people are doing is just essentially getting straight into the damage and trying to blitz her as fast as you possibly can, which is going to cause Damnation Declared to immediately start the second she has a moment of free time. However, if you wait for her attack chain to start, you can actually keep her stuck in that for quite some time, which will give you enough of a damage window to either break her or to just defeat her outright. And I'll be able to showcase this right here. Instead of going straight into damage, we're actually going to let her do her plunge, and then she's going to start her main attack chain. And as soon as this attack chain starts, we will be able to just damage her the whole way through. And obviously my Guishu Ratchet is very strong, So I can intentionally nerf my Lynn a bit, going for a weapon damage setup to make it a better showcase of just how much time you still have throughout this whole thing. It's not a small window, and this is usually the way that I'm able to defeat Warden of Inferno without breaking her in the Mystic Maze. So as you can see, we can just start tanking her attack chain and keep chunking her down, and she's going to be going through her attack chain, and it's really long, and all the way until there we had the... That wasn't a cut, that just happened. I guess I defeated her in a cutscene. I didn't know that could happen. Okay, but as you can see, you have a pretty lengthy amount of time. In fact, we actually lost a lot of time because we wound up staggering her when she got started on another one of her attack chains. So you had a pretty lengthy amount of time to just deal all of that damage to the boss. And this is with a setup that is much worse for bossing compared to the Greasy Ratchet. So as you can see, it is perfectly doable even with less optimal setups. Now, last up out of the bosses in the overworld, we have the Beast from Snowfield. And this one is actually a little bit of a tricky one. So obviously, if we get straight into it, we will be met with a near instant immunity phase. So the second that bar goes away, she is going to be going into the Symphony of Gunfire at the nearest opportunity, and any animation that she is doing prior will oftentimes just get skipped entirely and put you into that immunity phase, where she then starts flying above the ground and raining down bullets on everybody. And this can also be pretty disastrous for some characters, because if you're a melee character or are limited to the ground, then obviously if the boss is flying, it becomes infinitely more difficult to deal with her. And obviously this is a problem that can be solved if you are utilizing the boss stance destruction weapons. Now there is actually a way to beat her in one phase in a similar way to Hellfire without breaking her stance, and it is going to be a particular thing you're going to need to do. So you're going to need to damage her immediately, and then she's going to go into opening sets, and you need to break those summons before you start damaging her. And doing so will give you a time window in which you'll be able to damage her. And as you can see, it is pretty long, and even with a suboptimal run like that, where I lost the majority of my ratchets, I was still able to defeat her. And I can show again that if you do it without breaking the summons, she will just go straight into that immediate phase again. So we're gonna get her into the opening steps, and instead of breaking the summons, I'm going to completely ignore them and just go straight for Lynn. And we're gonna see right here, she's gonna go straight into the Symphony of Gunfire. This is extremely consistent across all of the times that I have fought her and tested this against her. You need to break these if you want to do this without destroying your stance. And this will obviously be very important for the Mystic Maze and Immersive Theater going forward, especially the Immersive Theater. At least if you aren't running full boss stance shredding setup. And of course, there is unfortunately one last boss in this game, and there isn't currently a way to fight him without going into the Mystic Maze. If we were in the previous reset, you would be able to fight him in the Immersive Theater, but he is not currently in the rotation there either. And also, unfortunately, he is the only boss in the game that does not seem to have some kind of mechanic or part of an attack chain where you can get him stuck there, and if you deal enough damage in that window, you would be able to one-cycle him. He will go through his entire attack chain, however, they are pretty fast, so it's not usually going to be a large enough damage window in order to defeat him without breaking him, unless you are just out-damaging him by that much. But even at then, you're typically going to be going through at least one immunity phase. But if you are making use of boss stance shredding weapons, you can actually skip the immunity phases. And I have this showcase here from a previous video of mine when I was talking about the Entropic Singularity. As we can see right here, we are able to get the boss to the half health threshold and start up the mobbing immunity phase, which also starts up his normal immunity phase. So we kind of condense both of those into one, and the mobbing immunity phase will actually end early because this is shorter than the typical 30-second limit. And what's more than that is once this immunity phase ends, he's not at the damage threshold for when he would go into his second one. So like I said before, you would also be able to let your supports stun him again and skip that other immunity phase, allowing you to defeat him outright while only going through that one singular phase. Also, I just realized that my face cam is below me as well in this recording, so there's two of me. Man, is the difference in my setup kind of crazy. But obviously that does it with every single boss that we currently have in the game. So I hope you learned a lot from these strategies, and especially when it comes to certain ways that you're going to be able to destroy them even without using the stance breaking weapon strategy, which is very important for Mystic Mazes, especially when you start facing off against Hellfire. And with that in mind, so long as you have enough damage, that turns the amount of bosses that have unavoidable immunity phases and really long clear times from 2 out of 5 of the bosses to 1 out of 5 of the bosses. And personally, I feel like that's pretty cool. Obviously, outside of the Mystic Maze and moments where you are going to want to be using regular support weapons for your characters instead of the boss stance shredding ones, you are going to want to utilize the boss stance shredding weapons as much as you can whenever you are facing off against them, simply because it is just going to make it so much easier and oftentimes much faster. But with that all out of the way, thank you all so much for watching. Make sure to leave a like on the video, but only if you actually did like the video, and I'd like to hear your thoughts about all these bosses in the comments down below. Whichever one of these you have a struggle with the most, whichever one's the hottest, whichever one is the hardest, we'll skip past that. Stay fucking hard! Whichever one gives you trouble, and if any of these strategies help you beat them a little bit faster. Also, I do have a Discord server, so if you would like to join up, interact with me and other people in the community, be sure to hit that link down in the description to join up and help grow the community. But with that all out of the way, thank you all so much for watching, and as always, I will see you all next time.